Hello, this is Will Hardy with Man Talk Radio. We are all about breaking down the walls of race and denomination. Your chosen Truth Network podcast is starting in just a few minutes. Enjoy it, share it, but most of all, thank you for listening to the Truth Network podcast.
This is the Truth Network.
Coming to you from an entrenched barricade deep in the heart of central North Carolina. Masculine Journey After Hours. A time to go deeper and be more transparent on the topic covered on this week's broadcast. So sit back and join us on this adventure. The Masculine Journey After Hours starts here now.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours. We are talking about vulnerability today. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
Andy, were you going to chime in?
Behind a deep barricade. You know, we really have the fence up, actually.
Yeah, no gophers are getting in here. We got that entrenched barricade.
It's entrenched barricade. Thank you. Yeah, we're entrenched. But you can be vulnerable in the entrenched barricade.
We got our fences up.
We do. You know, and that's the problem. We all kind of live with these fences that we keep up, keeping others out. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like the cocoon, right? You know, you wrap yourself up in it, but then you never push through it, and so you just sit there and die. Cheery episode.
Could have been a butterfly.
Cheery episode of Masculine Journey. Thank you. Andy, this was your topic.
Reflection.
No, it was our topic. Yeah. Let's say it that way. We were talking the other day, and we're talking about the power of vulnerability and then what gets in the way. Mm-hmm. And then we did talk about that on the last show, that the enemy hates it. Yeah. The enemy hates vulnerability.
Keeps a lot of people bound there for a long time.
It does. You know, it doesn't allow breakthrough. It doesn't allow intimacy.
Yeah. And what we're saying, not where he keeps you bound is I guess just the opposite of not being vulnerable. I guess that would be behind a pose or behind some kind of hiding behind a mask of afraid of really letting somebody know who we really are, the good, bad, and the ugly, and trusting that they're not going to reject us and they're going to continue to love us.
Yeah, you often see people fall on one side of the equation or the other. I'm not going to share hardly anything, or I'm going to throw so much at you, you're going to run away. Right. You know, you've probably been around those people, you know, and it's like, well, if people always leave, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're like some sandpaper there, you know.
Let me throw this grenade of crap in your lap, you know.
Yeah, they're just broken like we all are. They're just broken in a different way. But, this vulnerability, you know, part of this after hours is talking about where it's made a difference in our life, right? And so we talk about being a band of brothers. Yep. So we should have some stories here or there about when the vulnerability of one another helps you or helps others.
Yep. I will say this, whenever I started read Wild at Heart, went to the boot camps, there was a lot of breakthrough and victory I got. But I will have to say the victory accelerated when I got connected with a band of brothers. I've had some great Christian friends in my life, but there's a lot of them that I would not share with, and they probably could have handled it, but it was the culture and what I thought that you just didn't share. You know, like I say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have no problem with sharing the good. It's the bad and the ugly we just want to keep away. But when I feel like I really accelerated in my understanding who the true me was, of not, there's years that I wanted to have close relationships with Ben, but knew it wasn't possible because I wouldn't share anything. And having that desire for that, yet knowing I was inhibited from it. But then when it became possible when I got around you guys and you started sharing your stories. I'm like, whoa, people do this? This sounds like a counseling session or something, you know? And, it brings a lot of liberty. And then I remember I learned this scripture years ago, James 5:16, confess your faults one to another and pray for one another that you may be healed. And it's all right there. There's a prescription for health and wholeness if we just follow it, but we just don't like to get, transparent and vulnerable before our friends.
Yeah, and one thing I think we clarify that we're not saying is don't go into your couples therapy group or your couples Bible study and go, hey, I struggle with pornography. Right. It may not go over great with that whole collective group. Let God kind of walk you through.
Understand your audience.
Yeah, exactly. God, who do I share this with? You've laid it on my heart. Who do I
Right.
share this with, and when do I share it?
Yeah,
That's another
absolutely.
part, not just who, but give me the timing of when you want me
And
to
I
do
think
it.
that's important, is to pray for God to give you that safe place, that place where you can do that, because you're right. And the more you talk about it and the more you get freedom, the easier it is to talk about it in a more general group. But when you're first starting out, if you're really wanting to be vulnerable, find somebody that you can trust for sure.
Well, that falls to in Matthew where Jesus said, "Don't cast your pearls before swine." Pearl is a beauty to us, but it is a pain to the oyster. And those things that are birthed in and that become a treasure, the things that have been healed in my life are my pearls, my treasures. And you just can't just throw them out to anybody, because that's foolish.
Yeah. They're going to get stomped on at best. Yeah.
Well, and then they'll turn on you. And that is what we fear and why it's so hard to be open. But what you made me think of, we're getting into the Bible at the after hours. So
Why would
this
we
is
do
the
that on a
tough
Christian
part.
show?
I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
It's just scary. But you reminded me of Galatians 6, which is my favorite "this is how you correct people" verse. And I'm going to read it because I'm terrible at memory verses, but it's, "Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught doing something wrong, you who are directed by the Ruach, restore such a person in a spirit of gentleness, looking closely at yourself, so you are not tempted also." If you are a person that is following that, then you're a fairly safe person to come to, because there is no sin that any of us are not capable of committing.
Yeah.
And if we accept others, recognizing that, they're not going to shock you. They're not going to chase you away. You can be a good friend.
You guys amaze me. I have to say it's the book, if it's in there somewhere, verse 7, 12, whatever, I don't know. I know I remember the stories from the Bible, but I don't necessarily remember where they're located.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about vulnerability, right off the bat, going to the first boot camp and having Corey go from, I'm walking in here unbelieving, I don't know what's going on, I'm completely pissed off, this isn't for me, walking out of there getting baptized was such a weekend of itself. And to walk through that, all the different prayer times and other things that went on that were just so opening and inviting, that it started something. But really it wasn't, oh yeah, up on stage there's this one and then there's maybe another one here. It's just kind of continual and constant, because when you're in that band of brothers like you were talking about, Andy, it's Robbie just sharing in between the break between shows. It's the same thing. It's that constant, continual, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm at in my life, and this is what's going on. It's been going on, especially very thick since boot camp, because there's been a lot of little things. Hey, pray for me, pray for me, pray for me. This is what's going on. And to be a part of that, to be in that, it helps you to understand your own things, yeah, but it helps you to understand that you need to free your heart from the bondage and whatever it's got you, and it's got you trapped, it's got you you're held down, and you're getting body slammed, and you're just like, what's going on here? And it's like, no, you can get some freedom, talk to people, talk to your brothers, go there with them, and it's a wonderful place.
And there's times that sometimes a friend needs to make you do that. And Andy,
Yeah.
we have a clip that you had where a friend wisely kicks his friend in the backside and says, look, go be vulnerable with this person.
Yeah, so it's from Open Range, and we got Charlie, who is this gunslinger kind of guy that has come into a town and tried to help that town become free from these guys that are taking control of the town. And he's getting ready to go to a gunfight. And he's walking, they're leaving this girl's house. I think she's, her brother's the doctor of the town, and they're leaving her house. And Charlie has feelings for her, but he won't tell her that. And he's getting ready to go to a gunfight, and he may not live. And his buddy, I can't remember his name.
Boss.
Boss, there we go. So Boss tells him, Charlie, you're going to have to step up and tell her how you feel. You know, how is she going to know? So listen to the clip and we'll talk about it.
Are you just going to go off like that without saying nothing?
Ain't nothing to say.
I seen how you look at that gal, the way she looks at you. It ain't right to walk away without a word.
Well, what do you want me to tell her, boss? We probably ain't gonna make it. Be a big fat comfort.
I don't know what you should tell her, Charlie. I mean, I wish I'd have said more to my wife before she passed. This may be the last time she sees you in this world, Charlie, or you her. So tell her whatever you can, because she's entitled to more than just your backside walking away.
Charlie.
I'm not sure what's worth saying or not.
You don't have to say anything, Charlie.
Yeah, I do. Boss is right about that. He's right about a lot of things. It's just, I'm not who you think I am, Sue. I've been places, I've done things most of them I'm not proud of.
You know, I always hoped somebody gentle and caring might come along. Years pass, small town and all, and your hopes begin to fade a little every day until you hardly remember what they were. I've seen who you are, Charlie. The way you looked after that boy, and the respect you give Boss. They might be little bets, but they're enough for a woman who looks.
It's like I didn't even listen to the clip before I submitted it.
What's
Yes,
his name?
boss.
Boss.
Okay.
Boss.
Point taken. Vulnerable. Doesn't listen.
That would be
well.
Boss Alex.
I don't listen very well, so no. I really did like the clip because there's multi-factors are going on here. I think is you see a guy that he's shared his heart a little bit with this guy. Something God showed me when we were talking earlier is that men have troubles being vulnerable with each other. And then they wonder why they can't even be vulnerable with their wife or a woman. It's, if guys who you understand, how are you going to be able to go and do that, be vulnerable with a woman? And I think that's some of the stuff that gets in the way. We need to learn to be vulnerable generally with the people we're comfortable with before we go to the ones that we're not so comfortable with, right?
Right. Yeah, well, that makes sense. I was listening to that clip, and for me, what it was is you kind of had Boss, which was his name.
Really?
Kind of played the God character.
Yeah.
The Holy
Yeah,
Spirit
he did.
saying, prompting him, right? He
Right.
said, go do this, Charlie.
Yeah.
That's not the last thing you want to do. And because Charlie listens and becomes vulnerable, she becomes vulnerable.
Right. Yep.
Sue does as well.
Absolutely. There's
Right.
that dual, yeah. Mhm.
And then she speaks life back into him.
Right. And, yeah, exactly. And she points out the good that she's seen in him, not just the bad. And that's what we do as well. As we become vulnerable, we see the bad and start, talking about that. But our brothers point out the good that's in us and in coming back to us. So
They do?
sometimes.
Depends on that friend.
Maybe tonight. I'm not really sure.
One of the things that really stuck out to me was the lost opportunity that Boss mentioned.
Yeah.
That he had a wife, and there were things he needed to say to her that he did not. And so I think that's a very important thing that we say what's in our heart to the people that we love.
And
Yeah.
the fact that I think that he listened to the advice.
Mm-hmm.
So he must have done something where he contemplated it, thought, wow, there's a lot of wisdom there. Yeah. How often do we take great advice and just bypass and go on, and we look back and go, boy, I really wish I would have taken that advice. That was really good advice that I got. And you just it's so easy just to go on.
Well, the challenge is for really all of us is we don't even take our own advice.
Definitely not.
So, what happened to me at the boot camp, to be a little bit vulnerable, was, I had this great advice. I did the first talk, and the advice was to be needy out loud, right? Like, you got to tell Jesus what you want. You got to tell, so we can pray for you. You got to share that, right? And so the first night, we sat down with the prayer cards that guys had filled out. And if you never come to a boot camp, one of the neat things from my perspective is we had the ammo cans all around the camp, and people, they're needy out loud. They tell us what they're really struggling with. Well, that night a card came in from a camper that we all knew really well that just kind of, I just sat back and I went, oh my goodness, he's struggling with that. How vulnerable was he? How needy out loud was he, Robbie? And it really convicted me, like, yeah, Robbie, where's your prayer card, buddy? And like you had talked about, that when somebody's vulnerable, and this guy was vulnerable, I mean, really vulnerable, and in a really good way, I thought. And he, because the wind was blowing that direction, I went, yeah, I really need to take that to heart. And then, the next day when Andy did his talk, and, it opened up all sorts of files for me. And next thing I knew, I took out some cards. And man, I mean, it literally changed my boot camp on all sorts of levels. And not just then, but since then.
Yeah, after the show, before the show, we'll spend some time together talking about the show, and then after the show, we'll sit and talk about life. And it's just been amazing over the years how just someone sharing their heart and where they are and what God's doing with them leads to breakthrough for somebody else. Right? We've seen it multiple times in that room, that God just says, oh, yeah, I've got something for you too. And something will ping in your chest and you go, ooh. And then you'll start to listen, and God may have something there for you he wants to dig in then, or something for a later date to dig into, or just a kind word to remind you, and it's pretty cool that it's through that vulnerability that God chooses to reveal himself more fully sometimes. This is called dead air now.
Yeah, dead air. Yeah.
So Andy, what do you think when you had this topic?
Well, I was just thinking, we were talking about the Band of Brothers and being the newer guy around here. I'm not going to say rookie. I don't like that word either.
You are still the lighting technician.
Yeah, I am the lighting technician who lives in a cone of silence. So I got this. So, but having moved to a new place, new church, all that stuff, and learning that there is a band of brothers that you can trust your heart with, and yesterday was not a great day, but because it was great in some ways, but I have what we thought was eczema on my hands. And learned yesterday was psoriatic arthritis, which is a little bit deeper issue, and ended up being put on some medication that I wasn't crazy about, and I will be. But the interesting is, one of you guys texted me and said, "How you doing with all that?" And I appreciated that, because I was able to be a little vulnerable as much as you can in a text. I don't think texts are very vulnerable, by the way, because you can't see inflictions and that kind of thing. But anyway, that is neat to know that you can find people that are trustworthy with your heart, and you guys are trustworthy with my heart. So thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you need to practice, right? For me, it was when we first started doing boot camps, and I had the first few boot camps, I had my nephews coming up from Florida, and I'm like, oh no, I got to be vulnerable. I'm doing the wound talk. Oh my gosh, and having had my sons at camp, which has been a great blessing for me. But it's also, I think, it's sometimes that they've seen Dad be a lot more vulnerable than what they would normally see me. Because at home you got to have the answers. You got to figure out what you're going to do. You got to, even if it's not a pose, it's just a role you play.
Yeah.
Right. And when you can get away and not have to be that, right, and just be yourself and walk with God in it, it's pretty amazing. My mom had something she did years before she passed away, probably 4 or 5 years. I talked to her on the phone every week. I would call her every week, and she was in Florida, and she'd say, "Hey, I want to make sure that I tell you every time, the last thing I want to say is I want to say I love you, and I want that to be the last thing you hear. Because one of these days it will be the last thing you hear. And I want you to always know that, deeper than anything else, that I love you." Right? And she did it from that point on. and it was just pretty cool. And it's something that made me want to do that with my kids. Right? Because one of these days it will be the last time they hear it.
You don't want to do it with me? Yeah, I've never heard you say
I like you a lot, Robbie. Check yes or no. Yeah. No, I could.
I think Robbie was being needy out loud right there.
I could feel some. I could feel some conviction over that. I'm just not. I don't know. Maybe that's next boot camp.
After that deeply moving topic, Sam, it was wonderful to have some levity because the only example I've got is trivial and silly, but it also happened at boot camp, and it does have an illustration to it. When I was young, half a century ago, I loved chemistry, but my real passion was explosives. And I was sharing that over a meal and, talking about trinitrotoluene and nitrogen triiodide, and most people glazed over. Well, there was one guy that knew what I was talking about. So in that, if I had been doing today what I was doing 50 years ago, I'd probably be at Guantanamo Bay, but I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations is out on all the stuff I used to do with explosives. But that was my entertainment, and that was my biggest danger in my life. And I connected with a guy over something that silly, but it was, if I'd never opened up, that wouldn't have happened.
So he's seen some things.
Yeah. Different guy, actually, believe it or not.
Okay.
But
but we've all seen some things, right?
A fireball going off in front of a police officer is one of the things I've seen.
One of my favorite things about my kids as they've gotten older is, whether it's a birthday, Father's Day, whatever, is I look forward to their cards more than I look forward to anything else. Mm-hmm. They're going to give me something that's probably pretty cool, but I'm at the point where I don't need anything. I have to try to think of things that I need, just so they can buy me something. But it's the cards that I look forward to, because they'll be vulnerable when they write the cards. And the cards I keep. Not that I don't keep their gifts, but I can't tell you what they got me last birthday, I remember. But before that, I couldn't tell you 3 birthdays ago what I got. But I have the cards.
Yeah, right.
And the cards are special, and I've figured out what to ask your kids for. Consumables. Something you're going to use up.
Okay. That makes sense. Ish. So this group is quiet on vulnerability. Come on.
Well, I will follow up on Jim's story about all the explosions and everything. I told him that I had a dilemma after listening, that I was having trouble trying to figure out just how high an IQ you had to be able to do it, and just how low an IQ you had to have in order to do it.
True.
Hebrew logic is what you need there. You can have both and. It's not either or.
All right, so we've got just about 3 minutes left in this show, and we're not hearing any vulnerability stories. We're supposed to be talking about being vulnerable. Robbie did.
So I'll tell you.
Robbie's off the thing. Andy, you're up.
All right. So, the wound. I did that talk this time and told my story a little bit. And for the longest time, you'd hear different guys, and not all stories are going to be exact, but they're going to resonate with you. And to hear, various stories about the wound, it helped me to go deeper into understanding my father. When my father loved me, he was a good man to me, but he disappeared in a very critical part of my life. And to hear the stories and the vulnerability on other guys' lives, Sam, your dad, of not being there for you whenever it was important, where he could watch baseball all day but not, go
to my game.
Yeah, go to your game. Just the different stories I would hear, it's like, okay, there's something more than, you knew your dad loved you, just like I knew my dad loved me, but there was a lack of presence in my life. And for the longest time, I didn't get my wound. And the more I heard the stories, it's not just Sam's, it's everybody's. It's almost like just a collection of all these stories that begin to help you make sense of your own story and allow you to finally internalize things to where you can say, okay, that's where God needs to come in and heal me. God does the healing. It's not the stories from the other guys. They're the
catalyst.
The catalyst. Yeah. Thank you for filling that in there.
Yeah, well, and to be fair to my dad, Johnny Bench was a much better hitter than I was, so that's probably why I would have watched the Reds instead of going to my games. No, we had a few weeks ago, we were all sharing. It was one of the times that, we were talking into some depth, and one of the things God made clear to me that I haven't really fully processed was a lot of my anger over my sister being so mean to me. It really boiled down to the way he made clear that night. It felt like my dad was choosing my sister's heart over mine.
Yep.
And I had never articulated it that way. I'd never heard it that way. Okay, why was her heart more important than mine? Right? And so there's more to go dig into. And that's not one I have an answer to yet, but it's because of our conversation, and someone threw something out. I think Danny threw something out, and it made me think about it, and I'm like, oh, wow. God said, here's another nugget.
I remember that.
Here's another layer. Right? You'd think the onion would be all the way down to the bulb or whatever the bottom of the onion is, the seed or whatever's there. I don't know. But, I think it's just more onion, and you just peel back and there's more and there's more and there's more.
I got a pretty big onion. Okay. Saying, one of the things that came out of boot camp this time was, I would have told you my wound was being molested by an older cousin. And what God showed me was, no, it was those times when I was vulnerable to a first grade class and got picked on, and I began to sacrifice myself to change. And that kind of, you put the shields up and walk away for lots of years. So
yeah, and you talk about you take your question to the altar of acceptance.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a lot of what we do. But when God calls you to be vulnerable with somebody, you're not going to get that response. You're not going to get that. So walk with him in the midst of it. Can't say that. I can't say it enough that you got to walk with him in the midst of it, because if not, you may end up there. But he won't lead you astray. Go to masculinejourney.org, register for the boot camp.
This is the Truth Network.